Welcome to another Sci-Fi podcast where psychology and finances intersect. I have a very special guest with us today. Jeronica is here from Army Community Service. Jeronica, would you introduce yourself for me, please?
Sure. So my name is Jeronica Frierson, and I am the Domestic Violence Victim Advocate with the Family Advocacy Program. I've been here about 9 years, so yeah.
Jeronica is a very seasoned licensed clinical social worker, and one of the reasons I asked her to be my guest today is because we have a lot of financial stressors out there right now. And listen, audience, I want to validate for you before we even begin that times are really hard right now. Gas prices, inflation, utility bills that are increasing. For those that were struggling before the economic crisis, I feel for you. For those that are struggling as a result of the economic crisis, my heart goes out to you. But I want to give you some hope and expectation today that we don't have to wait on other people to experience a change that is going to move us in a direction away from this financial stress. Now, stress in of itself, Jeronica, as you know, can be a good thing.
It can.
However, it's when it starts to deplete you of those natural coping skills,
Absolutely.
of when it starts to become one of those things in life where now we're no longer coping well.
Absolutely.
So we've just said it all the things that are bothering us financially right now. But financial stress often compounds, and it can come from multiple sources. But Jeronica, one of the things I've noticed, and I'll ask for you to just kind of think about this with me and give me any input that you have. Now, I want to tell my audience, now I'm the bad cop here, and probably Jeronica is going to be the good cop. But if you've ever watched any of my sci-fi class series recordings or attended a live virtual class, you know that I tell it like it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat reality. I'm going to bring it to you. And that's my job as a clinician as well, as a licensed professional counselor, is to also bring about and shed light on what you could be doing to make it better. So put your steel toe boots on. I'm going to do some toe stepping in just a little bit. But what I want to talk about first is, Jeronica, when people become stressed and beyond the eustress, beyond the regular norm of stress, there's this lost sense of control that usually hits. That lost sense of control, and remember, we're saying sense, that lost sense of control. It may not be an actual loss of control, but that lost sense of control causes people to rebel.
Absolutely.
Rather than to adjust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think one of the things that we have to be very careful with is to not get tunnel vision in the sense that, it's everything is black or white or all or nothing. So I might as well, I've already messed up. So, I might as well just, run it all the way in, double down on bad decisions. And I don't know, Olivia, because we might both be bad cops here. And not in the sense, not bad cops, but I think, especially as it pertains to financial stress, there are some parameters or some boundaries that really need to be set. And boundaries in this sense, just like boundaries can give us peace about relationships that are overwhelming or difficult, or even toxic. Same difference, like setting boundaries with ourselves when it comes to money. So it can be, put your steel toe boots on, but hear us out, right? Because what happens is, think about it from this perspective. Once we develop healthy relationships or try to transition a relationship from a dysfunctional place to a more functional place, we all have a sense of peace, right?
Yes.
And so we don't have to, in the sense of stress, we don't have to be stressed out about if Huntsville Utilities is giving us another rate hike, randomly July and January every year. we may not like the gas prices, but we know that we've positioned ourselves as best we can to try and adjust. So
Right.
it's just more so, how do we navigate the stress that is sometimes inevitable?
That's right. Yes, very well stated. And I guess we're not going to have a good cap on today, but do know that Jeronica and I are feeling the impact ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so we do empathize with you, but we also know, as professional, career-driven women, that it does take a lot of boundaries, not only with other people, but with ourselves. So keep those steel-toed boots on, because this is where we're going next.
Absolutely. And if I may
Yes,
add,
please.
So I always, talking finances is a difficult topic, right?
Yes.
And so, and I'm sure within the audience, within our family, there's a huge range of, income and access and that sort of thing. And so really wanting to reiterate that this is not coming from a place of judgment.
No.
Because I'll be honest, even when I know better, I don't always do better.
That's right.
So I am definitely, I definitely make mistakes, or I don't stick to my budget or my financial plan as I may have intended. But I just, want to be sure that you're listening from a place, you understand that we're coming from a place not of judgment, but just of just wanting to educate and share how to adjust and how to even avoid some things.
Again, eloquently stated, because any social worker's presence or therapist presence, our job is to provide the information and not to advise you in one way or the other. We give you the information, and then you do with it what you would like to do based on what is going on in your world, because it would not be beneficial for us to advise you one way or the other.
Absolutely.
What you need to do next. This should come from a self-determined decision from yourself. So the reason I said to keep your steel-toed boots on, even though Jeronica is trying so sweetly to just make them Ugg boots, right?
Right.
So in behavioral economics and behavioral finance, the question is posed, why can't people plan ahead enough to prevent the emergencies they encounter? Now, granted, the economic crisis that we're enduring, these aren't our personal emergencies that have occurred. We are adjusting to an economic crisis that is currently occurring. However, here's where I'm going to bring reality to the table. Most of us were not prepared for an emergency financial situation before the economic crisis.
Absolutely.
And so it doesn't mean, though, that there's not something that you can do about it now. And here's some statistics with that. Before the economic crisis, 60% of all adults said they did not budget.
Yep.
4 in 10 were living beyond their means. And 20% said that they regularly spent more money than they earned. Those are all behaviors that we can control ourselves. Not the president, not Congress, not anyone else, but ourselves. But behavioral economics answers the question, why can't people plan ahead enough to prevent the emergencies they encounter? Well, the reason for that is clients, your clients, Jeronica, my clients, they might make decisions that are detrimental in the long run in order to address current pressing issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So before the economic crisis, it was a relationship crisis.
Absolutely.
Or it was a crisis before that.
Yes. And we have to think about, even if we take a look at just the last couple of years, right? There has been so much going on that has literally changed the way we interact with our families, with our friends, isolation, health issues, social and political climate there. And then on top of all of that, right, the recession.
Yes.
And trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. And then you also have, I believe, I think about my dad and I often, right? That's who I get a lot of, I guess, my financial savvy from. But we're different in the sense that, he's like, I don't have to have it. I'm a spender. He's a hoarder. Right. So, I'll admit that, but there's an approach to everything. The idea is to strike balance, but I think we've gotten really too comfortable being reactive instead of proactive. And then to your point, we've also gotten very comfortable, myself included, I'm not ever going to exclude myself, with sort of putting a Band-Aid on things. So I spend because I'm sad, right? So, we've all heard, I need a little retail therapy.
Yes.
Nope, you don't,
That's
right? And if we're spending for emotional reasons, right? The idea of sort of taking a look at what you even have available or not out the window, because that just compounds what you may already be experiencing, right?
So true.
So having to be really intentional about addressing the issue at hand.
Intentionality is the word of the day, Jeronica.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got to hear a speaker over the weekend, and I cannot wait to bring the information, the tidbits that I learned from this magnificent speaker on the class that I'll be teaching September 7th. It's on money and relationships, what's ailing you. Yes. So I'm going to be bringing, and I'll note who this person is to give him some street cred, but we look at our crises through a lens of dysfunction. Yes. We look through our current circumstances or what's holding us back, a tomb, so to speak. Yep. What's holding us back from getting out and moving around freely and confidently and making our own decisions, not allowing other people to make them for them. But here was the biggest barrier that he cited, is that we do not find ourselves worthy enough to move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The hardest part, I think, for a lot of people is actually giving yourself some grace and forgiving yourself, right?
Yes.
And grace in the sense that you recognize that you're human, you make mistakes. So not the kind of grace that says, okay, I'm going to go buy something else to add to the problem, right? But the grace to recognize that you can come back from anything. Everything is figure-outable, right? And I don't know if figure-outable is a word, but
yes,
like that's
but that
right.
sounds like a Winnie the Pooh term. Right, it's going to stick.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's okay. This situation is difficult. This is hard. I've messed up, right? Sometimes we just have to be straight up and say, you know what? I've messed up. But what do I need to do to create a strategy to help get me out of this? And then to your point, also recognizing that I don't care if you work at McDonald's or if you're a GS-15, you are worthy of living a life that does not include living paycheck to paycheck and being stress-free or being consumed with, concern over how you're going to pay for things. If you're the first person in your family that has figured out that I want to do things differently and I want to try to create balance and wealth, doesn't matter where you come from, you're absolutely worthy to do that, to pursue that, right?
I thank you for saying that. And, just so the audience knows, Jeronica had no idea what was going to happen in today's discussion. I just told her to be prepared to approach the topic of financial stress from a lens of anxiety, because we both treated anxiety disorders before and continue to do that in our work with the clients that we see here at Army Community Service. So even Jeronica, at the beginning, when she first started talking, she talked about tunnel vision. But that's the same thing that behavioral economics and behavioral finance talks about, is that tunneling where when under a lot of stress or in a crisis or up against a deadline, people focus all of their attention on the task at hand and may neglect or exclude everything else. And what they tend to exclude is themselves. What can I do to make this situation better? What is my internal locus of control where I can start now saying, you know what, I can do these things. And I'm about to give you some tips here on what you can do to help reduce this financial stress. Because listen, some of this financial stress can turn into what we call an adjustment disorder with anxiety, or it could be an adjustment disorder with some level of depression, or it can be an adjustment disorder with a mixed presentation of mood with both anxiety and depression. And I see a lot of clients who are not paying their bills or even filing their taxes for years because they've experienced a significant emotional event or a traumatic event that has paralyzed them from moving forward. But here's the bigger one, Jeronica, debt.
Yes.
It is one of the most common sources of financial stress. Nearly 8 in 10 Americans carry an average of about $16,000 in credit card debt. And it's not related to a global economic crisis. It's related to not setting boundaries with yourself, not setting boundaries with your family, not setting boundaries with your kids. So if we really think about that, we start to experience fear and panic, and then we lose sleep over it.
Absolutely. And so to your point, especially as it pertains to debt, you will find a lot of people when they go and they try to reconcile. Well, one, a lot of us are scared or anxious about reconciling our debt. So we go into the situation nervous, and that is really how it can get out of control, because we know it's bad, or we assume that it's bad. Sometimes call a spade, it's bad. And sometimes it's not as bad as you think it is, right? But there's so much power, so that locus of control, there's so much power in knowing your numbers.
Yes.
There's so much power in knowing your numbers. So even if it is not good, and it's going to take some time and some strategy and patience to get yourself out of it, it's figure outable. But to your point, when we think about debt and we think about relationships, how many of us are finding ourselves going into debt to try to maintain relationships or salvage a relationship? So you're overextending yourself in a way that you really don't have the capacity to manage emotionally or financially, right? And so you're anxious about your actions. You're anxious about, if that person is going to, keep up their end of the bargain. You see a lot of parents who are co-signing for their children, or you even co-signing for, other adult family members or whatnot. One thing that I think it is important to recognize is if it makes you feel uncomfortable in any way, you absolutely have the right to say no.
That's right. If
our relationship changes because of a no, then I'm going to work through that, right? It's not as simple as saying, I don't care, but I still want you to feel empowered to say no. You don't have to overextend yourself in that way.
Right. Because saying no can free you from the physical effects.
Yes.
Not only the emotional effects of financial stress, but the physical effects, which are notable: headaches, gastrointestinal issues, heart disease, weight gain because you've developed insomnia, your hormones are off balance, depression creeps in, increased levels of cortisol, that stress hormone, and then before you know it, your blood pressure has increased, and then you're developing type 2 diabetes. Yes. So these things can really impact you if left untreated. So what are you supposed to do then, Olivia? You said this would be a message of hope and expectation. So here it is. Jeronica and I know that anxiety is one of those umbrella disorders where the hallmark of anxiety, the primary symptom of anxiety, is avoidance.
Yes.
So as soon as you stop avoiding the problem and actually approach, and like Jeronica said, shedding light on that darkness, looking at the true numbers. And let me tell you something, when we talk about debt, the clients that I have, when we do a power pay, which is so simple, one day I'm just going to have to get a client in here and tell you just how wonderful power pay is. So when we do a Power Pay repayment plan, you can see the scales of stress just fall off
Literally.
their shoulders.
Absolutely.
They go from being in bondage into debt for 7 years if they only paid the minimum monthly payment.
Yes.
But with Power Pay, without making any additional payments, it's shaved off to now paying it back in 2.5 years.
Absolutely.
Olivia, how does that work? Well, if you want to know how it works, make an appointment with me. My information's going to be there. You'll be able to see it. So here are the things. Here's your hope and expectations. 4 changes you can make today to alleviate this financial stress. I'm going to say it. I know you're going to want to slap me in the face for saying it, but here it comes. Stick to a budget.
Yes.
But the first thing they need to do, Jeronica, with that budget, as you said, write the numbers down.
Listen, guys, it is so important. And to your point, it is very empowering, right? Because here's where a budget, a financial plan, a financial strategy, whatever you want to call it, like jazz it up, okay?
Yes.
But here's the thing. You get to sit down and you get to decide. I think a lot of us have this idea that budgets are restrictive and it tells us what we can't do, when actually budgets tell us what we can do.
Ooh,
right?
I like it.
So for instance, I know December, well, we all know if you celebrate Christmas, December is a heavy month for me, right? August, heavy month for me. I renew my licenses, my clinical licenses.
Here.
April, tags and taxes, right?
Yes.
So I know that when I'm working on my budget, I've got to make some adjustments ahead of time, right? So as I'm approaching those months, I'm prepared. So when you think about a budget, I really want you to think about it from a different perspective, in the sense that it is helping you decide what you can do.
That's right.
It also helps you decide, because I do believe that we all need some non-negotiables, right? So the non-negotiables in our budget is what we have to pay, or what we need to pay no matter what, right? So the things that, for instance, may be very important: your mortgage, your rent,
yes,
your car note. Why? If you have a car note, because that's what helps. We need a roof over our head, and the car gets you
to get to work,
right?
Yeah.
So allowing yourself to create some non-negotiables that no matter what happens, I am either going to pay this or pay on it, right? And then it gives you some structure, because one thing that anxiety does is it blows everything out of proportion. So it almost feels like you are being sprinkled with like a ton of confetti.
Yes.
And you just don't even know where to start with the cleanup. That's not it, right? So if we sit down and we actually number, what do we have? And it's important to know what we pay, how much we pay, when is it due?
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Even if there's some flexibility with due dates, right? So being willing to just look at what's going on, because it's yours. Look at what's going on.
Yeah. It is your money, after all.
Money after all, right?
Yeah, you make the decisions, and boy, Jeronica has succinctly summed up what a spend plan looks like. And I'm going to try and stay away from the word budget, because it's true. We start to think of a diet when we think of the word budget.
Yes.
But a spend plan, a budget, or a cash flow statement is where you've been. A net worth statement is where you are. And a spend plan is where you want to be.
Yes.
So let's think of it that way. And then also we need to think of building a healthy emergency fund.
Yes.
And some of you might be thinking, Olivia, how could I be putting savings away when I can barely meet my grocery bill or barely, there are variable expenses, I get it, within your spend plan that are being hit really big right now. But at the same time, it might call for you to have to live below your means and slash other variable expenses so that you can make it. That might mean getting rid of Hulu, Netflix, Hallmark Channel, Disney Plus, all these things that we pay. Oh my goodness, I'm too embarrassed to say it out loud, Veronica. But when you add it all up, we're talking $300, $400 a month.
Listen, it happens.
It's ridiculous.
Yes, and those subscriptions, I'm like, kind of like tucking my tail here as well, because seriously, all of a sudden, everything, $6.99, sure, $9.99, sure, but then when you have like 10 of them, right? It's like, oh, wow, it's literally $300.
Yes.
But even with an emergency fund, so it can be something as simple as putting $25 away so that you can have gas money to float you through to the next pay period, or if you need to, get a couple of things at the grocery store. So, of course, we all like to have or aspire to get to that 3 to 6 months of our household bills being able to cover that. And so that's a goal, but even just not having, if it's Tuesday and you don't get paid until Thursday or Friday, and being able to have gas money, a little reserve for gas money, or an incidental is powerful, and that also speaks to you setting some boundaries.
Yes.
The other piece is being sure, and this is why a spend plan is really important. A lot of us, we didn't see gas being $5+ I think, as prices were climbing, we really kind of got into that, surely this is going to like top out,
Am I
right?
dreaming?
Am I dreaming, right? Same difference with groceries. So let's create strategy around that. How many of us actually need to go back to old school and do a grocery list?
And do the envelope method.
And do envelope method, grocery list. Maybe we need to leave the kids at home. If you
bring
have
a calculator
kids,
with you. You
bring
open
a
the calculator on your phone. It's right
literally,
there. Yeah.
As you're going, so you know where to stop yourself.
That's right. And what you are going to prioritize. And it's not a social class thing.
Not at all.
I am a accredited financial counselor who takes great pride in coming from nothing and establishing something. I still shop at thrift stores.
Absolutely.
I still pull out my calculator at the grocery store.
Absolutely.
Or when I'm doing my online order, like, whoa, I didn't know grapes were so high this week. Okay, so won't be getting grapes this week. But that's how people become the millionaires next door.
Absolutely.
Is they learn how to prioritize. They don't just, I hit the jackpot every 2 weeks.
Nope.
No, this is a paycheck that is serving a purpose and ultimate creating something in the future.
Yes.
So the last 2 points, we'll move on here a little faster, but notice that Jeronica and I are not massaging your hearts with blaming other people today.
No.
And I'm sorry if that's what you expected. But we do want to massage your heart and knowing that we do know that it's hard, because as we've mentioned, it's hard for us too.
Absolutely.
But this next item is to track your progress.
Yes.
Not to track the president's progress, not to track Congress's progress, but to track your progress.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, this is what you can control, not anyone else. When we're in a therapy session with people, that is the guiding principle.
Yes.
What can you control today? And let me tell you about tracking progress. Any progress is progress.
Yes.
If this month you saved $5 and last month you were in a deficit by 100, hey, that's $105 right there that you have gained. So that is progress.
Yes. Progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
Progress,
I
not
love
perfection.
that you said that, because listen, perfection is unattainable.
Yes.
But we can strive for excellence.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I love that you said this. Now listen, here's the last one, and I know you're not going to like this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Get some exercise.
Yes.
Jeronica and I know that when it comes to anxiety and long-standing stressors that are just sitting there in our minds, sitting in our bodies, famous book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
The reason you need to get exercise is because when you are anxious, your sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive. And so we need to break or intercept the messages that are going from our bodies to our brain to tell us to panic even more. Exercise creates larger body movements, which sends signals, oddly, to our brain that things are okay. okay.
Absolutely. So anxiety sort of impedes clarity, right? It really does. And so the need to get the benefit of getting moving is you get to focus on something else. You start to feel better physically, right? You actually, like, stress literally will set up in our body, right?
Yes.
And we need to be able to move and feel empowered through that movement,
Yes.
right? And then we're able to have some clarity about what we need to do or what we want to do. So
That's
it's just the idea that you take care of your whole self, right? Like all parts of us. So it's whether it's spending plan, and here's the other thing about exercise is that it shows that you're able to have some discipline, right? And you decide, like, I'm going to make certain moves, or I'm going to commit to do hard things because
Yeah.
I can do hard things, right?
I
I can do
love the way you
uncomfortable
put
things.
that because, again, someone I'm sure listening to this is, how is exercise going to help with the financial crisis? Well, again, we're not going to be focused at large
Nope.
on the financial crisis. We're going to be focused at large on what you can control.
Yep.
And again, what Jeronica was saying, and listen, we've done this day in and day out with clients, and we see how it works. Is when you get your body moving, it gets your brain freed from all the outside noise, brings clarity, and then your thought processes start to unclog, and now you are more confident in making that next step.
Absolutely.
And then your finances start getting moving, your relationships start improving. I can't tell you just how important it is for exercise to be a part of your life. So you've been given 4 tips today. I'm glad that you listened. Jeronica, thank you so much for being on this podcast today. And we hope to see you in the class coming up on September 7th. And again, it's called Money and Relationships, What is Ailing You? And I'm actually going to dive a little further into how money can cause some other issues, but also how to get out of that trap. I hope that you tune in for the next podcast and have a lovely day.